it's my pleasure to moderate this very distinguished panel of gentlemen. At OKI, I mentioned that we get to collaborate with partners across the region, the state, the Midwest, and this is 4 examples of different agencies, organizations that OKI is in direct partnership with on a daily basis, some new since January. But we look forward to our topic today, which is smart mobility and infrastructure, building the Internet of Transportation. I thought I'd run through real quick our members here of the panel. First, Andrew Bremer, you heard him speak this morning, Managing Director at Drive Ohio, just since this January of this year. Andrew's specialties: nonprofit management, program development, communications, government relations, public policy, and I have a feeling lots more. Prior to Drive Ohio, he has over 7 years of experience working at ODOT, and we'll hear more about that. John Gardocki here to my immediate left is a service analyst for SORTA Metro, our local here in Greater Cincinnati, Hamilton County, of course, our public transit agency since May of 2015. And I'm not going to go over all the work that John does at SORTA. It's a pleasure to have him as a member of our ICC at OKI, our technical committee. So very involved in a lot of the operations and planning at SORTA Metro. And then Jiaqi Ma. Jiaqi is a new friend we've met in the last few months from the University of Cincinnati. He's assistant professor since August, just August of last year. I have to keep reminding myself because he seems like a native Cincinnatian as myself, right? And prior, he had worked over 3 years as a transportation research engineer, research scientist, and project manager, doing research on various traffic operation projects at Federal Highway Research Center. And last but not least, I did it in alphabetical order. That's how I thought it could be fair, is Pete Metz, our dear friend from the Chamber. Pete is the Transportation Policy and Coalition Manager at our Cincinnati, USA Regional Chamber. This is a new position that was created in September 2016. I'm sure Pete will talk about it, but just with the Chamber from our business community, the huge impact on transportation on our economic vitality and the interest from our businesses to have a stake, and we do need that private partnership as we address the many issues we face with transportation. So I thought we'd start first and let the guys, because y'all don't want to hear from me, with a question. And John, I thought we'd first start with you just from the transit perspective, if that's okay. What do you and SORTA Metro see as the largest challenge or challenges that are being faced in Greater Cincinnati as we relate to transportation, and what are you all doing to address those challenges?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Again, I'm a transit planner from Metro. One of the biggest things, which I think is a lot of people's issues, is funding. You know, what kind of funding we're getting. We get over 50% of our funding from the City of Cincinnati's earnings tax. So if you work within the City of Cincinnati, you're paying into that tax. But from the state of Ohio, we get, just for reference, 63 cents per capita. We are ranked 38th in the nation, but we are 7th in population. And so we have a large difference between what we're giving per person to what our population is. And so we are celebrating our 46th anniversary this year as a bus agency, and we haven't really made any changes to our system. And so one thing that's on everybody's mind, including the Chamber, is how do we get people to move here, to work here, and we're just not connecting those people correctly. So with more funding, we are looking to put into place what we are calling a Reinventing Metro plan, which is a potential sales tax levy for the Hamilton County region, where we'd be able to expand into the region. We're looking at 3 key aspects, including adding frequency, changing the span of service, so having routes that maybe go for 24 hours, meeting the demand of our logistics distribution centers who might have 3 shifts, as well as improving customer amenities.
And Pete, I thought the same question for you. I thought you would follow well with from John.
Yeah, and so the chamber, we're the regional chamber, so we represent 4,000 members across the entire Southwest Ohio, Northern Kentucky, and Indiana region. Many of those are the big corporations whose names you know, but a large number of those as well are small businesses, 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 employees. And we're in this conversation really for three reasons we heard from our members. The first is we heard from them that there are open positions that they can't fill. They're trying to hire, they're trying to grow, they're trying to expand, and they can't fill those positions because people can't get to them. The rate of turnover for their employment is really high. So they attract talent, they get them here, they train them, they start working, but they are not reliably on time, whether it's because a bus breaks down or a bus doesn't show up, or their car breaks down and they don't have other options. And so that rate of turnover is costing businesses at the bottom line. And then the third is either that people are applying for jobs in Cincinnati or across our region, or businesses are looking at our region to locate, and they see a number of options across the country, whether it's our competitors in Nashville or Dallas or Chicago or Atlanta, or you name the city, and they look at those cities and they see transportation choices in those places that they don't see here, and so we're losing some of that talent to other places, and so our employers say we are having trouble attracting the best and the brightest to our region. And so that's why we stepped into this conversation, because we know that it's more than just connecting people who live here today to where they have been going for decades, but it has to be about connecting people to where the development patterns are in this region, and doing it in a way that attracts top talent, top businesses. So that's why we're in this, and we see that as the biggest challenge. And then I'd add one more thing. We're the chamber, and we talk about jobs. Connection to jobs is sort of our bread and butter, but what we've heard from our members is that it's also about connections to education and healthcare and all the great amenities that Cincinnati has to offer, this neighborhood included. And we have to be able to meet people at the various points in their life where they are. Otherwise, they won't be able to walk in the front door of their business and be the best employee they can be.
And Pete, can you talk a little bit the innovation that Internet of Transportation that the Chamber is looking at, what partnerships you all are helping with other collaborators in the region?
So one of the first things we did as a region was as a chamber is we said we need to be innovative, and we need to help foster innovation as an organization. How can we work with our partners in the public sector? How can we work with our members to be innovators? And so the first project, if you will, was the launch of the Cincinnati Mobility Lab, which is a partnership between OKI and SORTA and Tank and the city of Cincinnati, the chamber, as well as Uber. And so Uber is made Cincinnati a testing ground for how they partner with local governments, municipal planning organizations, and public transit to see how we can improve access across our region. It's a 3-year partnership. We're really excited about it. Launched it 2 months ago, and it is the first of many, we believe, innovative partnerships that we can build with the public and the private sector to start connecting people in places where they haven't been connected previously.
Thank you for that. And Jiaqi, moving on to you next, just share from your perspective. I know there's many different opinions and perspectives, so many things going on at UC, but from your perspective, what you see as the challenge, key challenge in transportation facing our region, and what you are involved with at UC.
Sure. We, as a smart city event, smart transportation, we've been talking about different pillars, mobility, resiliency, and so on. So I can list a bunch of those. From my transportation researcher perspective, the one word that has been rarely mentioned in this event, but is actually related to everybody's daily life, is accessibility. The people want to access their destinations, their workplace, so we have seen the things that we want removed, or not totally removed, but encourage people to do public transportation, to the alternative transportation modes. But think about today, if you don't allow people to drive, then can they access their destination, their workplace on time? So accessibility is not just distance-wise, right? It's spatial temporal. Arrive there on time. If you are late every day, your boss is going to fire you immediately. So that's the problem that we're doing. But to do the transportation, to improve this accessibility is always one of my research focus. So my team has been doing from a technology perspective. We're developing advanced technologies like connected automated vehicle solutions, and also advanced service solutions like mini shuttles, vehicle sharing, and so on, trying to solve the problem. but also it have to rely on the traditional systems like the improvement of the bus service and so on. So from another perspective is what the university is doing is pull a bunch of towns together, because today's transportation is just so complex. Nobody can solve a single transportation problem by themselves, by single one discipline. It is all interdisciplinary. It requires different engineers, mechanical, aerospace, civil engineers, policy people, even human behavior, computer scientists, data scientists, planning, and so on. So what the university is doing, I'm going to be part of it, is that working with these people together and solve the emerging problems.
Thank you for that. And Andrew, before we get the state perspective, I was just going to give a little commentary. I think, we call our involvement with Uber our Cincinnati Mobility Lab. And it is this sort of playground, this laboratory with the private sector via Uber. But as I'm getting to know more and more people from UC and have conversations, it's UC, I use the term, rather than lab, to me it's a playground. We get to experiment and we get to see, the perspectives, me working in the public sector as a person in transportation planning, I like to think I think of it multidisciplinary, but to hear the different perspectives from the private sector, from the university, that's what I see that's percolating through our communities, through our region over the last several months, and really spurring some very interesting conversations and possibilities for collaboration. Yeah.
So I just want to add, we are, in launching this mobility lab, we put Cincinnati on a map. It was not a conversation. It was a conversation that was happening with Uber in San Francisco. And one of the things that set us apart as a region was that when they said, all right, let's go out and meet with folks in Cincinnati, what happened was we were able to meet with the mayor and with the heads of government on the local level. We were able to meet with all of our transportation organizations in one day and bring together CEOs all in one trip. And the feedback we got was that doesn't happen everywhere. That doesn't happen in every city where all of those groups are on the same page and ready and willing and eager to be innovative. And so I think that's one thing that we really can put a feather in our cap to say we are all sort of from public sector, private sector to different levels of government working together with a common sort of vision in mind. And it allows us to be open to innovative partnerships out there. So I just think that's a really critical part of it.
All right, Andrew, time left you last, but we wanted to hear just the state perspective. What are you seeing with Drive Ohio as far as challenges, not just for our region, but across the state? We know we're not the only ones facing these accessibility, mobility issues, safety concerns. So please share.
So as the new kid on the block with Drive Ohio, so at the state level, we've had many challenges, as you can imagine. So the greatest challenge I see happening at the state level is just the willingness to collaborate and willingness to continue to collaborate. I think a wise man once said in a meeting yesterday that it's easy to have that first meeting. It's more important to who shows up in the second meeting. That just demonstrates the amount of energy and commitment that everybody has. And this being the second annual Smart Cincy Summit, there's a lot of great energy here. But even at the state level, my experience that I just relayed this morning from ODOT, just the willingness to think outside of the box. ODOT is filled with a bunch of great engineers and great thinkers and managers. But when it came to some of those other questions, such as law enforcement, such as insurance, such as the telecommunications industry, and understanding the rules and regulations of that sector, we realized very quickly we didn't have all the answers. And trying to get other answers from other state agencies was a bit of a challenge because we wouldn't understand sometimes the question we were asking. And they, in turn, didn't understand the question we were asking, and the answer they provided didn't really make sense to us. So Drive Ohio is created to try and address that, to be the state's one-stop shop for all things smart mobility, so that we can leverage answers from the Department of Public Safety, Insurance, the Office of Information Technology at DAS. So the ability to think outside the box and collaborate is something that is putting Ohio on the map. We are meeting nationally. We're recognized internationally in several conferences. So just the ability to cut through all of the silos and thinking about smart whatever, whether it's transportation or smart city infrastructure, will help propel us into the future. So that's the biggest challenge, and I think it can be overcome. It's just a willingness of commitment that we need to do.
And can you speak, there might be questions from the crowd, just with the election later this year and possible changes. Part of it is, it's a good thing we're having these conversations now so that we can be prepared with new administration, to be at the forefront and make sure that we're speaking as a region on our needs, what we need from Columbus. But can you speak to anything that as far as you see Drive Ohio agenda for the remaining of the year, or where you see it going in the future?
So there's a couple of initiatives that we've started as Drive Ohio, one of which is, of course, the continuation of our pilot corridors. We have 4 pilot corridors, smart corridors throughout the state, soon to be 5. I think we put that one on the map on I-75, as well as 2 smart cities and possibly even 3 smart cities, the addition of Cincinnati on our map as well. So there's a tremendous amount of energy and collaboration already taking place in Ohio, but concrete steps, we underwent an RFP process to select a team to help us with a statewide systems engineering analysis. That'll help with US DOT sort of paperwork and sort of out-of-the-box technological solutions as it relates to transportation, so that we can create a baseline level of understanding and paperwork that's already been done, so that if a local community would like to implement such things as signal phase and timing information on all of their signalized intersections, other information, roadside units along their city streets or township roads, whatever, that they would have an easy pathway to implement that technology. So we're looking forward to implementing that plan statewide, as well as addressing some of the data questions. What does it look like from a state perspective to have access to this data that is happening not only in Smart Columbus, but Smart Cincy as well, and other initiatives going on throughout the state? What is in the public interest as far as data is concerned? What are the rules and regulations and governance of that data? So this team will help us through that process, contract pending. So stay tuned for that at drive.ohio.gov.
I was going to possibly open it to for questions from the audience, if that's okay with our panelists, unless there was something else that you all in your wanted to share. I just wanted to make sure I hit you all. Okay, we really prepared for this, as you can tell, so I'm just making sure I listened to Jim. And are there any questions from the group that you'd like to hear from them? Well, yes, sir. Handsome gentleman to my left. Can we hear you? Good morning. We can hear you. We can hear you.
Mind if I address that first? So, thank you for that question. I think there might be a little misunderstanding. The intent of, I guess, reforming that program was not to freeze anybody out. So if there is anybody or a community frozen out of medical transportation, we'd like to hear about it. But just in the limited discussions that I've been involved with at ODOT as well as the Department of Health at the state of Ohio, that we underwent a study to take a look at the resources already being spent in the state of Ohio as it relates to public transit. And this was done as a response to many transit agencies in the state of Ohio that said that there aren't enough resources to do the job that they were set out to do. During the course of that study, we discovered that there is a lot of money being spent on health and human service transportation that is redundant. There are many transportation providers in the state of Ohio that may be duplicating services, and so that effort was trying to address some of the efficiencies that could be had. If someone needed a medical transportation service, they were going to one location, picking up one person, and then taking them to their destination. At the same time, another request was being made, maybe a few minutes apart, for another shuttle or bus or car, taxi, what have you, to pick up another person at that same location. And so it was all an effort to try and address the efficiencies within that system. I think it's a great effort at the state of Ohio. There's more information out there. I'd be happy to provide to you if there are members of the community that are being frozen out or providers that may have more questions about that.
And I'll add something just with our conversations OKI is having with Uber and our mobility lab is the sharing of data. And something we have talked about initially is food deserts across our region, identifying those. And again, we're at the very initial stages. It's looking at data. Sometimes you have to look at it, you know, and let it settle in before the solutions come to a head, certainly. But in our conversations with our Uber partners, it's not just now food. We're looking at health, access to health and clinics. We're looking at access to education. So many other very social economic needs of our citizenry. So I can't emphasize that enough. It's difficult here in this short time to share with you all, but in every conversation that we're having as we look to being a smart Cincy, a smart region, and be innovative, is we're making sure we're not leaving anyone behind. So even in our initial conversations, yes, OKI is looking at Uber data for our traffic demand model. How can we estimate the number of trips that people are going to take using an Uber or a Lyft or a ride sharing? We need to estimate that to know the traffic volumes and travel times. But we're also looking at data of how we can serve our citizens better and rise everyone's quality of life here across the region. So I would speak to that. I'm not familiar with any of that going on with Medicaid, but that's certainly part of our conversations as we're looking at these opportunities. Yes, sir. Question? What's the status of Uber in this area? Uber has been here about 4 years. I invite you to introduce yourself to the gentleman seated next to you. Mark Wood is our local Uber representative working with us on the Cincinnati Mobility Lab. But they've been active in 4 years and is growing tremendously. We're really eager to see not only Uber, but Lyft, other ride sharing grow and that impact that it can have from a transportation perspective on assisting with our congestion and safety and just access for people. So these are all part of the conversations we're having. But they're alive and well.
Yeah, let me jump in and maybe talk specifically about a couple of the things that are going on as part of the Mobility Lab. As I mentioned, it's a 3-year partnership, and when we announced this, we announced sort of the first round of work that's being done as part of it. So I'm sure I'm going to miss something because there was a lot at the announcement. But we have a first of its kind study going on between SORTA, Tank, and Uber. It's the first time that Uber has shared their data alongside with 2 transit authorities with a goal of figuring out how can we optimize the public transit experience. So that's a really exciting study. Looking forward to getting the results of that back. Uber Movement is live in Cincinnati. If you go to movement.uber.com, you can see that we are one of 7 cities globally that has that data available to the public. You know, we're with cities like San Francisco and Boston and Johannesburg and Paris, which is our normal peer set that we're always compared to. So, you know, we're in good company there. That's live, and that is the type of tool that informs a lot of the work that OKI is doing with them. There's a study of our urban curbside, so all of those areas where there is congestion because you've got public transit, whether it's bus or streetcar, you've got delivery trucks and rideshare and bike and pedestrian, all converging at specific points around our urban core. There's a study underway with national experts to say how do we better utilize the curb space to alleviate all that congestion, allow public transit to move more quickly, allow everyone to get where they need to go seamlessly. We at the Chamber are working closely with them and our members to understand what the future of commuting looks like and where can we stand up new tools and pilot projects to help people get to jobs or get to work more efficiently and effectively than they had been able to previously. So I think that was the bulk of what we announced. We also announced a partnership with Meals on Wheels to help Uber drivers be delivery agents to get folks who are in need of meals the food that they need. So that's the first wave of announcements, but there is more to come because, as Robyn mentioned, we've got staff on the ground dedicated to thinking about this every day.
Any other questions? Yes, in the back row. Yes. OKI uses a number of sources for our data and our traffic demand model. I'm not familiar with that, and I'm not the tech expert in the room. We do have, there's a row of OKI staff people sitting right in front of you. It's my understanding from Uber, this is Uber riders themselves. We are scrubbing, we're being very careful with privacy. We won't have any association with who these people, we won't be able to identify trips. It's sort of an amalgamation. I think we've looked at having at least 5 or 10 people before we would even look at the volume on a particular route, origin, destination. So I don't know if that answered your question. Mark, did you want to? What type of data? I'm sorry?
I would say the movement data is the best source of information. It's really dynamic. You can compare year over year travel times via Uber rides. You can compare times of day. You can compare all sorts of different things, trip distances from one point to the other. So I would encourage everyone here who wants to view that data to go to movement.uber.com. They've done a number of, at least one that I know of, sort of models of how to use that data, specifically focused on the Brent Spence Bridge and how construction over the last summer impacted travel times. You'll find that access to CVG is one of the big travel pieces that I've looked at. We at the Chamber host all of our big festivals, so whether it's Blink or Taste of Cincinnati or Oktoberfest, we can track how those festivals are impacting Uber travel times to and from those events, and we can start help optimize those types of things. So movement.uber.com is where I would direct you to access that data.
Yes, Mark? You have a question? Yeah, we have time. I think I was being asked to repeat the questions, or for you all just to stand and project. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, thank you. People on the web.
Sure. Mark Wood again from Uber. I have a question for John. You mentioned SORTA looking at additional funding towards the end of the year, or potentially bring some to the ballot, and how that would expand service opportunities. Professor Ma, you also mentioned the kind of research your group does into alternative transportation. So I'd love to hear kind of the collaboration between you two and the research partners you might have that can help chart what that future accessibility might look like if additional funding is granted.
Sure. So we've partnered with the UC Economics Center to do a study on access to employment within the OKI region. Granted, we do have a few express routes that run to our northern and eastern counties, but I think the number is we're missing about 75,000 jobs. And again, our systems, we've been running the same system for 46 years. We're trying to look at places we're missing, such as the Blue Ash area, where there's a huge conglomerate of employment there. So that's one way we're collaborating. The other thing we're doing is we're in a development with UC Uptown Consortium, OKI, and the City of Cincinnati for what we're calling the Smart Transit Hub. This is a project that is just adjacent to the new MLK interchange. And it's a collaboration to build a parking structure with the basement would be a transit hub where we would have what we're hoping to have bus rapid transit buses move through there, as well as I know UC and the hospital systems are trying to merge their shuttle systems into one, and so they would have their shuttle systems go through there as well, maybe eventually autonomous vehicles. And so that would be a giant transfer hub to get to all the different systems, since we have different ways of funding. We're not connected as of right now. So.
I can make a quick comment on that. So, as a university, we do transportation. This is my ground transportation. So we look at definitely multimodal, and transit is a very important part of the whole multimodal transportation systems. And we are particularly interested in working with agencies like SORTA, to help you solve the problems and achieve your mission. A lot of the we have been thinking about all day long doing this, but nothing else. Is thinking about advanced solutions. For example, using mini shuttles to solve the first mile, last mile problem, then connect to the your mass transit systems. These solutions a lot of that have been going on at the university. It's on paper, it's published somewhere, archived. And then we really hope that we can work with the agencies and apply some of these things to solve problems. So that's really the goal. And as I said, I've been excited to tell people that in the beginning I mentioned that in the university we're putting resources together. We hope to build a research center that can reach out to the public and private agencies and work with them really to solve problems. So real problems, not a calculation problem. So that's it.
Is there another question here? Let me hand you the microphone so we can hear you.
Chad Edwards with Immersion Design. We're architects and planners, but I also am on a 2030 working group trying to get a 2030 district here in Cincinnati, and that measures energy, water, and transportation metrics. We're also looking to add health, but centered around transportation, there's a lot of great discussion here today and of course across the region about connectivity and getting people access and those types of efficiencies. But have you leveraged your collective power to try to push the fuel choice conversation? So obviously there's more fossil fuels being used, and electric in our region is really coal power, although there are some renewables that are being applied to that. But just curious in terms of algae to oil or anything like that. Thank you.
Yeah, so I can talk about Metro. Right now we have 357 diesel buses. 27 of those are hybrid. The reason why we really haven't transitioned over to CNG or electric is because of the cost. An electric bus is about twice the cost of a diesel bus. So we are looking into moving towards electric. We're kind of thinking about skipping over CNG. The region doesn't have exactly what we're looking for with the pipelines and things. And so with our Reinventing Metro plan, we will be looking into adding electric buses on our bus rapid transit lines, and hopefully we'll be piloting some type of electric project within the next 5 years or so.
Hey. When I think about smart transportation, one of the things that I think about is the potential to manage demand for transportation. And specifically, I have the perception that our highway system in the region is overbuilt, and we have the perception of scarcity because we are trying to build for the peak demand period for rush hour rather than a more sustained usage level. I would analogize to our energy system where we have time of day pricing and we push the biggest users to off-peak time periods so that we don't have to build power generation for every potential demand spike. And I wonder whether we would be better off pushing some of our large commercial users of the transportation system to off-peak hours as a better alternative than building additional highway lanes.
Excellent question. So as far as managing the demand for transportation, I don't know if we can get there. There will always be a demand for transportation, especially during the peak hours. That's why everybody travels during that time. And even commercial traffic also needs to travel during those peak hours. So, you know, a statewide policy, I can't speak to that, but we are piloting one of our corridors in the Columbus region, Interstate I-670, is mostly a commuter corridor. And that corridor is 3-4 lanes wide in each direction in some places. And it gets very congested during the peak hours. And the smart lane, is what we're calling it, will open and close that shoulder during the peak congestion hours so that we are focused on maintaining the core of the system, maybe the 3 or 4 lanes that are already there, but also having that option of opening up that outside shoulder or inside shoulder, as the case may be, for travel during those peak times. And it actually results in our current estimation of half the cost of doing a traditional add lane and maintenance operations. So we want to see exactly how that corridor performs, and if we can translate it to other parts of the state, I-275, for example, or I-271 in Cleveland. So we want to see how that corridor performs. There are similar corridors throughout the country in Michigan, Washington, D.C., and other places. We're actively studying those as well to see how we can demand or open and close capacity as we need it.
If I can push the question one step further, because there are places, for example, the Golden Gate Bridge, where there are virtual tolls. Nobody needs to stop. Everybody drives through, but they capture your license plate on the way through. And then time of day pricing, so that if we were, for example, to say that commercial vehicles traveling the Brent Spence Bridge during rush hour pay a premium price, then many of those commercial vehicles get out of rush hour and our traffic congestion goes away without a lot of expensive building.
Excellent. And real quick, that's an excellent point, and that speaks to our continued collaboration with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet and the Commonwealth of Kentucky over the Brent Spence Bridge. So we are continuing that conversation, but again, it goes back to the willingness to collaborate and to have those conversations. We're well open to that in the state of Ohio, so thank you for that.
I can add a quick comment on that. So actually, there's a term in transportation engineering called ATDM. I was thinking what that is. Advanced Transportation Demand Management. I think that's it is. So the idea is that you manage demand from my perspective, two areas, right? One is you really ask people to travel, change their departure time. For example, pricing is actually a very good example. You know, on very busy corridors, you have dynamic pricing. You have during peak hours, you price very high. I remember like earlier this year, Virginia opened the HOT lane on I-66, and the peak hour, the travel 10 miles, like $40 or something. Think about that. Will they still travel? So that's pricing is actually the way to help you to push people to change the departure time. So you spread the peak to the shoulders of the congestion. And the other way is things called integrated corridor management. You manage freeways and arterials at the same time. So for example, when there's an incident on your freeway or during peak hour, that freeway segment is super congested. So that's the way you can use travel information. You divert, reroute people to other places. In that case, you manage the demand better. So in summary, I think building new roads actually I feel is no longer really an option for a lot of agencies these days. That's why we're talking about smart cities technologies today, using these technologies to potentially improve the capacity, virtual capacity of our freeway system, try to push as many people and many vehicles through highways as possible.
That's good. Thank you, Jiaqi. I've been told we'll wrap it up, and I was just going to say it's absolutely right with technology. Is also allowing our funding to go further because we're being smart about it, right? Instead of continuing to build new infrastructure, we're optimizing our existing infrastructure through technology. So I thank you all. Thank you for the questions. Great questions and comments. I invite you all, please. I think folks will be around all day, so do introduce yourself and make connections.